is on the staff.
Yeah. I just took you to church, and that was Dr. Clark's memorial at Abyssinian Church. And Gil Noble was sitting next to me at that affair. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if Gil hadn't vouched for me, because they came up and they tried to put me out. But Gil was over there, and I said, well, I'm with Gil. and that's how it made it possible. But you can see how we as black people, when we go to church to mourn one of our elders, such as Dr. Clark was, and this is how we celebrate. We go dig deep down in our spirit and bring out the true spiritual energy of being black in America, surviving all the onslaught of slavery and all the nonsense. And then we have tests running throughout our lives where we're about to go snap, you know, and that demon in all of us is about to come out, but little voice says, hey, ain't time to go off now, because we've been through too much. And my brother here, Chris Noble, son of Gil Noble, the DNA, half DNA of who saved my life. I mean, this man, I wouldn't be sitting here today if it hadn't been for your father. I really, you know, because that was my man. I mean, I just admired him, respected him so much, and what he brought to us as a people. And it's such an honor to have you back here. And I just want to pay homage during Black History Month, because he's one of our greatest elders. And I'm sorry the torment you went through today, but that's nothing but a test of the times.
Yeah.
The test of the times. You know, this is the Trump era. Spiritual people are being tested, whether the demon can still exist as long as he has, being jealous of another spiritual being, the brother that came before. And but we've been through this before. You know, I'll be 79 this year, and I relate back to old days when where I really snapped. And I had to pay for it too, snapping. But it's all a test. It's growing up black in America, and it's going to come at you every day. And if you want to share the experience that happened today, if you like to, or rather not.
Well, it was
a test.
It was I don't know what you want to call it, but I was on the bus, the crosstown bus coming over here, and this white gentleman got on the bus. I won't even call him a gentleman. This white individual got on the bus and bumped into this sister without saying, excuse me. And the sister rightfully said, you didn't say excuse me. And this animal said, F you, you house slave, go sucker, you know what. And I mean, it was so over the top. And, you know, I just got off probation. So it took everything I had not to turn around and go try and kill him to protect his sister. And luckily it didn't get to a physical situation, because all bets would have been off. That would have been the line that, but just the verbal assault was so outrageous. And he was talking to me.
Right.
And, you know, a black sister should always feel like someone has her back, like she's protected. And I did not feel good about not turning around and strangling this guy. I have to be honest with you, I don't feel good about it.
But this it's a test.
This is, you know, we as black folks have to understand what's behind the mask. That a lot of these people walking around here have a mask on, but what's really behind that mask? What's in the mindset? And with this, in this Trump era that we're in, we're seeing the mask being removed, and people are having the courage to come out and say exactly what's on their mind. And, you know, people need to be checked. and I don't feel good about not checking this man. I was on my way here. I wouldn't be here. I'd be in a police precinct right now.
Right.
And I would have tried to kill him.
Well, it's
That's how over the top. I can't even tell your audience how vulgar the language was to a sister who is just reacting to being bumped into and not being acknowledged.
We're talking about the 66th Street
Crosstown bus.
which goes through the Silk
Central Park.
District of New York.
Yeah.
All right. So this is the most, you know, I travel, me and my wife go over to First Avenue. We take that bus often. And I find it the most polite bus you can get on in New York. It's like old New York. Excuse me, and everybody's very polite. So this is an abomination for that line alone. You know, just to see that kind of stuff go on.
And he was not a homeless man. He was under control.
He
was
educated,
and just
right mind, and the woman was a decent woman,
a beautiful sister
a beautiful sister.
in her
So there's
midlife, in her
cause for that.
50s.
It sounded like you were up in the hood somewhere.
Waiting to get off the bus. And this guy just came and bumped her and pushed her out the way like she wasn't a
Like
human
he did it
being.
on purpose.
And
Wow.
you know, I didn't see the bump. I just
Okay.
heard it.
Okay.
I just heard her react to it. But I can't even tell your audience how vulgar the language was, and he kept calling her a slave. Can you imagine?
Wow.
So he was talking to me.
Was challenged.
And this is what they did to us during slavery, where they made examples of the black male in front of black women, sending a message that black men can't protect you. And to be in 2020 and to have that enter my mind, and that's how and I could have protected her, and I would have protected her. If it had gotten physical, all bets are off.
Yeah.
All bets are off, and I would not be here right now because I would have went for the gut. I would have went for the jugular vein.
It's a test of your. It's a test, brother. We're all
You
being
know,
tested.
If I wasn't on my way to your show, that would have been another. I wouldn't have let the language go.
Well, Grant would have shot him, probably.
No, I met more violent people. I didn't shoot. Could have, should have, but I didn't. But people like this, they're looking for the confrontation. There are people that I met, and I'm thinking of one incident I had with a guy, and I said, you need to go home today and thank God you met me and not somebody like you. I said, because if I were like you, you'd be dead now. And I had a gun up under his chin. I said, don't let your mouth take your body someplace it can't get it back from. I said, the only reason you're going to be able to walk away from this incident is because I'm willing to let you live. But don't come out in the street and threaten somebody.
But how does a civilian deal with it?
Well, he did the right thing.
Okay.
He did the right thing. Yeah, I've been carrying a weapon for 45 years, so it's
So you unfolded.
well, the fact is that I have
Of course,
the
you got a
power.
badge.
I have the power. I don't have a badge now, but I have the power, but I don't exercise the power. It's got to be a life and death situation for me to exercise the power.
Right.
And that is where grace and humility comes in.
During your 20 years, you never shot.
Never
you
shot
never
anybody.
killed anybody.
Never shot anybody.
You never shot anybody?
Never shot anybody.
20 years.
In bank robberies, all kinds of scenarios where I could have shot people, and by law, could have killed them, and it would have been no problem, a clean shoot, never pulled the trigger.
Well, see,
To
that's,
have
you know,
power
yeah.
and not utilize it is a stage of humility.
Yes.
Wow.
And that's a more powerful.
And that is a higher level of power.
Yes. That's a higher level.
And
Higher level.
that is the way I operated. And I've had people try to shoot me. We had a guy once, he went for it, he tried to shoot me and my partner. We did him. We didn't even draw our weapons, but we did him. You know, and people were applauding us because there was a big crowd of people. See, everybody has value.
Yeah,
Even that man, as debased as he is, he's a human being. He has...
He wasn't acting like one.
True, but he has some value.
No consideration in that situation.
You have value, I have value, everybody has value. And being that we are not the givers of life, we should refrain from being the takers of life.
I agree with that.
You know, I value my life.
All that sounds...
I will kill somebody if they try to
I
do
don't,
me,
you
but-
know, in certain situations, you don't know what each individual will do. You know, if he hadn't been coming here...
or he wouldn't have been on that bus.
Well,
It never. It's your fault. It never.
No,
No.
that's-
Yeah. It wouldn't have. It wouldn't have
That could
occurred. But
happen, right.
definitely, it's a test.
It's a
Because
test.
ordinarily, you wouldn't have been on that bus coming cross town, would you?
Yeah, maybe it's here for you to tell the story. Perhaps somebody on the bus will hear it, and maybe something good will come from it. I don't know if that's possible.
Well,
But what
I-
about you being the lady on the bus?
Well,
Oh, wow.
I can honestly tell you that
You turned around
My-
and punched him.
no, I would not have done that. But taking it from a different perspective, one of the things that my children, and they're all grown now, had asked me to stop doing was to speak on misbehavior.
Okay.
Seeing young children, especially our young women, school time, on the bus, on the subways.
But that's what we've always done.
And they've been loud, sometimes a little vulgar, you know, a little confrontational. And people will stand and look at them and they may say, what are you looking at me for, or whatever. I was always the one, and one incident comes to mind, the number 3 train. I'm on the number 3 train in the middle. Now, coming up to 148, you have to be at the front to get off.
Right.
I have a briefcase and my over-the-shoulder bag. Briefcase is sitting on the side of me, and there's like 5 young boys. And they found the set of keys that belonged to the conductor. You know, the conductor set
Oh,
keys.
yeah.
And they were back there trying to open
the
the
cab.
side. And I was like, what the heck? I actually left my bag. Now, this is crazy now. I'm talking in 2000. Left my bag, got up and said, give me the keys. Give me the keys. And he says, who are you? What are you? And I went to the one that had the keys. So it's like 4 or 5. I said,
Yeah.
you going to give it to her? Are you a cop or something? I said, you don't want to know. Just give me the keys. So now they gave me the keys. I guess they was rewarded with the confrontation. I went back to my seat and I sat. And I realized that I have now passed 96th Street. So now I have
The
100.
transfer point. Right.
How dare me? But that was my instinct that just went and did that. I didn't
That's
have
old
the
school.
comprehension of
Old
fear.
school.
Now, they could have cursed me or whatever, but by the time the train came into 148th Street, they were watching me to get off. I didn't get off at 110. I didn't get off at 116. I didn't get off at 125th. And they're riding. So now, you know, more people are coming on the train. When we got up to 148th, I took the keys and I gave them to the woman in the token booth. My family was livid. I said, Mom, please tell me that wasn't you. Because that was the talk of the town.
Right, right.
You know? And I says, wow, it was me. So I'm saying that to say that no one really knows how they're going to respond to situations. And yes, I have met with confrontation, even up until a couple of weeks ago, on that B16, 19 bus that comes out of the Bronx, that comes,
Right,
it
comes
starts
across
and it goes across.
125th?
No, 145th.
Yeah.
It starts
Okay.
up at the park and
BX
it goes all the way
19.
into the Bronx.
Yeah.
Yes. That's horrible, the
That's
language and things, but sometimes we have to understand that we know, as a black woman, I know how to understand the protection that a black man is giving me. I don't have to have myself disjointed by thinking that they need to respond to everything.
Okay.
Because responding to everything can take away everything that we have. So much that we've struggled for. At one point, the NAACP used to have a little book to tell you things that you do. Remember back in the South, and I used
The
to
green
tell
book.
the green or
The Green Book.
not to eyeball
Oh, wow.
when you're stopped, not to try to look at the badge and say I know who you are, not to be confrontational. So you talked about the spirit, and I'm saying to you, that woman went home and she knew in the heart of heart that had that person touched her, you would have been there. You would have been there.
And you would have.
And you would have been there.
I would have, but I don't know if she knew that.
No, no.
Oh, she knows.
knows.
She knows.
She knows.
She knows.
Any woman
Yeah.
that's here living in New York City understands the confrontation. And it's not about you have to be ego, macho, in terms of protecting.
There you go.
Because the bottom line is the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is for you to be safe. Because
That's
see,
right.
now you can deal with that. This particular situation that's happened with you today is an opportunity, I think, for us to now start educating more and more young girls, women, the elderly, that we don't necessarily have to meet force with force.
Right.
Amen.
And we don't have to necessarily pounce on someone, because there was that line drawn. He was verbal. Verbal.
It was what he said, though.
I understand,
It
but you were
so
saying he was
over the
talking to you because he wanted to
It was
provoke
street.
you.
It was street.
He was provoking you, and I understand that. Like, I'm the man. I could do and say whatever I want, and what you gonna do about it?
Yeah.
That was a test.
And you on the 66th Street
right.
cross-town.
That was a test.
Once the overt act is committed, there's no coming back.
Exactly. And he
If-
didn't do that.
If you throw the first punch, you're the
There,
assailant.
there you go.
Right.
And he didn't
So
do that.
you let him talk, whatever, as long as he doesn't touch that woman. If had he touched her
Then it
and you
would've been
intervened, you wouldn't have had a problem.
The unique issue with what happened was what he said was so over the line
Right.
that it required a beatdown.
I
It did
understand
not
that.
require talking.
I understand
And so
that.
that's where I feel empty because
Well, I'm going to tell you, don't feel empty. I cannot stress to you how important it is for you to take that moment and start educating. Educating our people on how to know when to fight
Yeah.
and how to fight.
Amen, Mary.
I'm serious. You have to know how to
Amen.
fight.
Amen.
Because right now, people are walking around like road rage. You ever be in a car and somebody cuts you off and
Yeah,
the person
yeah,
speeds
yeah,
up?
yeah,
I used to tell my husband all the time, let it be. Oh, no, let it be. Because you
Yeah.
don't know what's going on with them.
Yeah.
And they pull up on the side of you, they can shoot you. They can do anything to you. So sometimes you just got to let it go. But you come back and you think about it because now you're prepared. We walk down. I'm a very free-spirited walking person. And I have people all the time telling me, how do you walk? I'm born and raised in Harlem.
Yeah.
And I walk down 8th Avenue, 7th
Any place you wanna go.
Lenox Avenue,
right.
Bradhurst. And sometimes I have to be conscious of myself. And people will walk up and say, hey, sister, you guys. I said, baby, I ain't got nothing tonight, honey. Sorry about that. My man waiting on me, gotta go. Gotta know what to say sometimes.
Yeah. This is hard.
it made me think of my father because you know, it's just every time I try and digest being in that pressure cooker that he was in for 45 years,
Yeah.
dealing with all of these incidents of police shootings
Yes.
and racism and all of these things, and you were talking about the Sean Bell incident, and he covered that story very closely, and not letting that get him to such an angry point that it affected his mission or took him off course, and also the fact that he didn't bring it home
That's right.
and it didn't drive
Yeah.
him crazy.
Yeah.
But do you know what that
Ooh.
took?
So he's an extraordinary man. I was there to see it. So I saw what he was doing, what he was going through. And I was telling Winston, I never heard my father curse.
Exactly.
I curse every day.
Okay.
With all of that anger, with the way ABC was treating him,
Right.
and all the things that he had to deal with, he didn't come home and start MFing and never hit my mother. Was a gentleman, and he used that anger as fuel to fight the fight
And that's
for the liberation of his people. And he never steered off course. It's one of the most amazing things as a son to witness that is just beyond anything I can describe.
And you
to
want to know something? You have just laid the foundation with a new layer of support, because not every man or woman have had that experience. They didn't have a home wherein they can say that. So many of our young people come from a home that may not have a mother and a father.
Yeah.
And if they have a mother and a father, it's an abusive situation
Right.
where the norm becomes the beatings and the cursing and the. So right now, you may not even realize it, but you have the tools.
Yeah.
You have the tools, and it's not that someone came and trying to sell it to you. You lived it. You grew up in it. So you can tell a brother that every time they see something that's being disrespectful, they don't have to fight at that moment for the disrespect, that there's levels of it. And they have to learn how to rise above some of the levels. Because had you done something at the level that it was, as bad as it was, it would have set you back.
Right.
And you
it's-
wouldn't be here to give the message.
It's kind of interesting to hear you say that, because when I was in prison, I gave a lot of lectures to the inmates, to the black inmates. And one of the things I was telling the brothers was, when you come in contact with another brother who's coming out of his face the wrong way or saying something disrespectful, try and look at the deeper situation.
Right.
There's a reason why his behavior is dysfunctional.
That's right.
And try and understand that, and just and kind of just pass it off as, damn, this brother got that slave virus.
That's right.
He's damaged.
Slave.
That's right.
Don't take it personal. There's a deeper reason. When we come in contact with dysfunctional behavior, there's a deeper context to that. And as people, we can't judge each other individually.
That's right. That's right.
Especially
That's
in the time of Trump.
Right.
Yeah.
Especially at this time. It's interesting, because I watched Trump this morning, and I started laughing. I said, this man is having a good time.
Yes, he's enjoying
He's
what he's doing.
enjoying himself.
Yeah.
Because he's
And
stirring the pot.
That's all he's doing.
Yeah.
And we have to sit back and watch this and say, wait a minute, we're going to get him. I mean, God's not going to let this go on but so much longer.
Yeah.
And all it's doing is weeding out all the bad seeds. That democracy will reign and will go according to the book, as Martin would say, and we will find the spiritual part of all humans.
Winston, tell us about the guy that came to Nan with the hat, with the cap.
God. That was another test. But that was an easy one. That was an easy one, really. He came in with, not Make America, Keep America Great.
Make America Great Again.
No, that was the
red
latest
cap?
one for this year is Keep America Great, I think, or whatever it said. It had 45 on the side.
Right.
And we're at National Action Network, and we're introducing black media,
Yes.
our own station of news and documentaries, and J.J. Watts is the lead on it, and Sharpton was there, of course, and introduced the whole thing. And this guy was in the audience, and he was with CCJ
J.C. Watts.
And but when I first came in, I was in there at 5:30, and we didn't start till almost 7:30.
Yeah, 7:30.
But this whole time, this guy was sitting there with this hat on, and me being so anti-Trump, and it being in my house, this is my, Nan is like my house. And I so wanted to say something, but I knew I was in the House of Justice, and we take in all comers. We take in everybody. We absorb every whichever, and that's Sharpton's theme. We have to tolerate all the nonsense that the black mind goes through. And that is utter nonsense if you're black and you're for Trump. You're just a sick mind. You're another sicko coming in the door. And that's church for me. And that is church for me. And my preacher is Reverend Sharpton. And I get a good word every week. I get a political analysis of what's going on in the world. And I've been there 22 years, and it's never failed me. Every week he soothes my soul.
Amen.
He soothes my soul. Well, I don't get angry with some guy with a hat of Trump and 45. The old drunken Marine doesn't come out.
The texture of his skin?
Dark skin, dark skin guy.
A black guy with a Trump hat.
Black guy with a Trump hat. No confusion.
So you have to
whether he's black or
understand
not.
Sharpton, too.
Yeah, well, he's
Reverend Sharpton has elevated.
Right.
All right, I was a part of, we used to have breakfast meetings at 22 West
okay.
on Saturday mornings back in the day, before Sharpton became Sharpton. When he was
Jumpsuit time. Jumpsuit.
medallion,
Yeah.
and he came into Harlem, and I took him on a tour
Okay.
to go from 145th up to 155th Street to give him the layout of some of the concerns that I was concerned about. And he was still referred to as Reverend Al. And you had a lot of people back then who are right underneath him today. They wouldn't even speak to him back then. So what I'm saying is that the times
Everybody
changed. So if you would, Reverend Al knew how to be humble.
That's right.
He knew the word.
Yeah.
A lot of preachers preach, but
He
do
can
they
preach.
understand? Oh, he can preach. Reverend Al can preach.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
But
yeah.
do they understand the word?
No.
You talk about being humble, humility, grace and mercy. You're always going to be tested. We all get tested. But when you dig back down and think about your dad and the climate for where your dad, and the first time I actually met your dad, I was introduced to your father through a person called Jimmy Banks.
Jimmy Banks.
Jimmy Banks used to be with Jim Breslin, Jim Breslin. and
Breslin.
Okay.
The Daily
And-
News.
That's right. That was back during my time.
What year are we talking?
Oh, we talking going
70s?
back into the
70s.
late 70s,
Yeah.
the late
80s,
70s.
early 80s.
Right. And there was a lot of tension going on. A lot of people don't understand. People think the 60s were bad. The 70s, we've always had our trying time.
Crazy.
So that's why you have to reach back.
70s were
And it's
crazy.
no accident that you have had the experience of life that you've had. You said that when you was incarcerated, you actually had opportunities to talk to other inmates.
It was.
Your father's DNA.
Right.
I can't even explain to you what that experience was like. First of all, when I went into prison, my bunkie, which is the closest relationship that you have in prison, was the head of the Nation of Islam
Okay.
from New York,
Okay.
Okay.
and we bonded right away.
Well, that was arranged.
Out of 5,000 prisoners, I ended up with the head of the Nation of Islam.
Yeah, of course.
Just think
'cause
about-
you were Gil
think about
Nolan's
that.
son.
Right.
Because you were Gil Nolan's son.
But
They
why
had
would-
to protect you. You know?
It was the most amazing thing. But so we bonded, and it's funny because my father had, when I went in, it was at the tail end of my father's life. He had had a stroke the year before, and Minister Farrakhan had come in to the hospital to see my father
Okay.
twice,
Yeah.
and invited me and my sister and my niece to come with him. They were doing the Million Man March in Harlem. It was focused on Gaddafi and Libya.
Okay.
It was outside. It was a tremendous event, and he invited me to that event. So we went over with the family, and he called me up on stage. And, he had told the audience that he had just seen my father, and gave some very nice words about my father and brought me up on stage. So here I am in prison, and I'm outside in the yard working out, and the brothers from the nation say, "Noble, come here." And they brought me into the chapel. And they were watching the tape of Minister Farrakhan bring me up on stage.
Wow. Wow.
So, you know, that ingratiated me with the brothers. I ended up joining the nation inside. And it was a remarkable journey. It got to a point where my bunkie, who had been in for 15 years, told the brothers, I want him to take over my post. So I ended up being the head of the nation.
That's leadership.
Inside. Now, during that, just to show you how my father followed me in prison.
Yeah, go ahead.
Probably the first couple of months I was there, a brother came up to me, he goes, "You're Gil Noble's son?" And I go, "Yeah." He goes, "I'm from Asbury Park, and I'm in for, you know, dealing heroin. And a friend of ours just disappeared, and we couldn't, we had no idea where he was, you know, what had happened to him." And he said, "It wasn't until I saw your father's show, Essay on Drugs."
Okay.
The brother who was in the shooting gallery, who was my father taped shooing up, who had all the sores over his body, who was telling young people not to do this. That was the brother.
Wow.
See that?
This brother's post in prison was to do all the black events for all the black inmates. He was in charge of that. So when he got out, he said, "Listen, I want you to take over my duty."
Wow.
This was the first year. And he said, I know you'll protect it and do the right thing with it, so I'm going to turn it over to you. So, you know, the thing about prison is, like, when you first get there, for the first year, nobody talks to you because they want to find out if you're real,
If you're a plant.
if you're fake. Doesn't matter who you are. You have to, it just gets to a point where there's a term in prison where they go, he's official, where they think that you know, you are, they watch you day and night, watch you eat breakfast, dinner, who you watch TV with. And so, but what happened to speed up the process of everybody getting to know me was the fact that I started doing these events.
Okay.
So I started talking to them and putting on these events. It wasn't until 2 years had gone by where I got the post in the nation. So, you know, I would conduct Juma service on Friday, and you know, I had 4 nights in the chapel a week where I could show films and do all of these things.
That's right. Dr. J was coming to me for films, for DVDs.
You get ready. I'm getting ready to tell you that story.
He was getting that stuff from me.
Let me tell you how important Dr. J was.
Oh, wow.
So Dr.
right, I
J
forgot
was
about
mentoring me. I would speak to him every week, and he was always available to me.
That's right.
And I said, "Dr. J, I need to get all my father's tapes."
Oh, wow.
And I said, "Just get them to a friend of mine."
Okay.
And he had no knowledge of what was going to happen.
Okay.
But in prison, they don't want that sort of information
That's
getting into
right.
prison.
Not at all.
That's right.
So I had to get it in.
Yeah. That was
And
good.
I could have been thrown in isolation
right.
or transferred. I mean, it was a big risk, but to see the reaction of the brothers, once they saw, I got my father's tape on Malcolm X, Adam Clayton Powell, Paul Robeson, Essay on Drugs, Jazz, all of these things, and the brothers were just looking at it and just eating it up. They loved it.
Oh, yeah.
And so it was worth all the risk. And so I'm kind of telling you all these things because there were a lot of forces. My father's just all over me. Now, another day, I'm in the black hole. The black hole was a room where all the black men watch TV. So I'm in there watching TV, and the Rasta brothers come in and say, "Noble, come here." I never heard my first name for 4 years. Everybody called me Noble. So he said, Noble, come here. So they brought me into the chapel because they had time in the chapel too. They had 4 tapes on Bob Marley. And every tape used the segment of my father's interview with Bob Marley.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I
with
started
his
to bring
name-
that. I started to bring that. Oh,
And,
wow.
and they're like, Noble, you didn't tell us, you know. So that ingratiated me with the
wow.
Rastas.
Yeah.
And so it was a movement going
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
It was God protecting me and
That's
right.
and watching over me. My father was with
That's
me.
right. That's
And the experience was out of this world. And so I immersed the way I got through 4 years was I immersed myself in the
and
work.
teaching.
And
All I did was put on events for the young brothers.
We're gonna. We have to
Okay.
bring out the man now.
Okay,
We're gonna run number 1, or go talking about Malcolm.
yes.
That's a
And I
great
want the
tape.
public to see this. Those of you
what's your
who don't
calling?
remember,
They ate him up.
or,
The brothers loved Malcolm. When I
but
showed,
that's
when I
needed.
showed-
My first inoculation was Dr. King. And then that led me to Adam Powell and a lot of the people. But I was put off by Malcolm X
Why?
because what he was saying and the way he was saying it was too blunt. It was dangerous. And you didn't say those things in those days. I told you we had been socialized as kids to get around wrong, not to confront it. And Malcolm spoke in very declarative terms, and he said some terrible things about white people that we thought, but you would never express it, you see. He talked about the way this country was not a democracy, but a hypocrisy, and he talked about what had been happening to us down south and up south. And he was not shy. He had and he was very, very intimidating. I'm man enough to admit it. There are a lot of people who are my age who will speak, you know, with love about Malcolm as though it had always been that way. But that's not so. He scared a lot of us to death. And then, mind you, I had this apartment, a bachelor apartment on Convent Avenue, and I'd been having a lot of fun, you know. And here he comes talking about a different way of life. First of all, he dropped his last name. Well, we had been socialized to take great pride in our last name. The more European it sounded, the better. There was not a flinch about, you know, Noble. Oh, that's wonderful. If it wasn't French enough, you'd put an ETT on it, you know, to make it sound more French. And so here's a man who dropped his good last name and replaced it with an X. I thought the man was crazy. And then he talked about discipline. And he talked
Self-discipline?
Self-discipline. He said that we do not believe in drinking. And at the time I would have a taste. And he said that we don't smoke cigarettes with or without a label on them. And I would smoke, you know, with a label.
Yes.
And he said, we don't eat pork. Well, you know, I love me some ribs. And then he said, we don't fornicate.
Yes.
And so psychologically, I said, Malcolm, I'll see you later.
Yes.
You know, and all. But what he was doing in deprecating whiteness, I came to understand later that he was rearranging the balance that we needed, because we had glorified whiteness and deprecated blackness. And so he was tilting, using exaggerated terms, to give us a sense of self and to take whites down a little as they needed to be. And the discipline that he was talking about were things that we really needed to address. But I couldn't swallow that at the time. So jumping forward in time, a lot of things happened in the struggle, and Malcolm was struck down in '65, and I never went to hear him speak. My only impression of Malcolm was on the sound bites on the evening news. And
if there was a rally in Harlem, where I'm living now, I'm living in Harlem, and he would have a rally 10 blocks away, I would go in the other direction.
Did
Because
he
I
have a
didn't-
mosque there?
He had a mosque on 116th Street, and I didn't live too far away from there. But I went out of my way to avoid this man because I thought he was wrong. I had a white friend who was going to Princeton, and he called my wife and I one weekend, and he said, could you put me up over the weekend, because Malcolm X just came down to Princeton, and I never heard anything like that in my life. Blue eyes, pale skin, blonde hair. Could you put me up? I said, well, you can come on up here if you want to, you know. So he came up, and Sunday morning, he said, okay, I'm ready to go to the Rockland Palace. We lived maybe 4 blocks from the Rockland Palace at the time in the projects. And he said, okay, let's go. I said, what do you mean, let's? You know? And so we had a big argument. I said, I'm not going to go there. Do you realize what he's been saying about you and your people? That's anathema to me. And we had a big argument, and he walked off and went down there on his own. And he came back whiter than when he left.
I bet he did.
Because he said that he had been put in a segregated section with no chairs. The white people had to stand. And Malcolm came out there and poured boiling oil over their whiteness, informationally. It was more intense than what he had done at Princeton, because in Princeton he had just demolished the heads of the academic departments there, theology, history, and whatnot. But here he was talking in more graphic terms, and he really gave this fella, Don Emerson, who we were friendly with, a shellacking. I said, I told you shouldn't have gone. And I said, the man is crazy, and I don't know why on earth you felt. And I was arrogant in my ignorance. And it wasn't until 1965, when he was assassinated, that there was a brother who lived in the projects. And he called me aside and he said, I'll tell you why Malcolm was killed. And I said, what do you mean? He said, coming up to my apartment. So I went and he gave me a recording he had made of Malcolm at one of his speeches. And so for the first time, I heard Malcolm unedited, in context.
The media's.
Now, you know, as we all know, my father fell in love with Malcolm.
Yeah.
Malcolm
We all
was everything to my father. Malcolm was the unreachable bar of love of black people, of discipline, of intellect. His pureness, Malcolm's level of pureness in what he was doing was everything to my father. And he modeled his life after that. And you know, my father I used to hear stories all the time. He used to tell me, he said, you know, Malcolm used to read 3 newspapers before everyone's alarm clock went off in the morning. So for him, that was a great lesson, because when Malcolm walked out of the door, he was prepared.
Yes.
And my father was always, he was a voracious reader, and he was always prepared, my father. So he modeled his life after Malcolm. Malcolm was we had Malcolm's picture all over the house. He was very close with Dr. Betty Shabazz.
Oh, right.
Malcolm's brother slept in my bed when I went to Lincoln University. So anyone associated and close to Malcolm, my father gravitated towards. So he was, I can't tell you what Malcolm meant in our household. So it's interesting to hear him be very honest, and it's a lot of courage for him to say what he said.
You know, I was 24 when Malcolm died, and I had been away a lot of that time. I spent 4 years away in the service. I was in the Marine Corps for 4 years, 60 to 64. So when I came back, I'd been in a different world. So I saw Malcolm as a nut, just like your father. I mean, that was crazy. Don't eat pork. I mean, that alone drove me the other way. And I was raised in the Baptist church. And, you know, talking about changing my religion to some strange land? No, what are you talking about? I mean, things ain't that bad, especially in New York. So I could never understand him. I didn't learn about Malcolm until he died, and I was actually a part of that. I remember going to a meeting and them talking against Malcolm in 64, just before he died. And matter of fact, they couldn't find a church to put Malcolm away.
That's right.
And the church where he was buried was across the street from where I lived, 147th Street and Amsterdam Avenue, which is the old Lido. I forgot what church it's called now. But that's where the memorial was, because they couldn't find any place to bury Malcolm. So Malcolm was, like all of our great heroes, we find out about them after they died.
Right.
Yeah.
After they died. And I got to know Malcolm through Reverend Kenyatta,
Oh, Kenyatta.
who was Malcolm's bodyguard.
Yeah.
I did
Kenyatta.
shows with Reverend Kenyatta for 8 years, and I got to know the inside and outs of Malcolm, how disciplined he was.
Yeah.
And matter of fact, February 21st was his death day, I think, and your father's born February 22nd. So happy birthday to
That was my parents' anniversary.
Gil
February
Noble.
22nd.
All right? So,
Yeah,
I mean,
the reason you saw the long life's work that my father put out there was because of the courage that he got from Malcolm. My
okay.
father had tremendous courage, but he was taught that courage. You don't get that. You just don't. You don't get that naturally. You have to be taught to stand up,
Well, we all wake up at one time.
and you have to be taught that. You know, it's funny. Another little quick story. When he first started out at WLIB, Bill McQuarrie was the news director. And shout out to Bill McQuarrie because he gave my father his start. Without Bill McQuarrie
That's
giving my
right.
father that
That's right.
opportunity, you would have
That's
never saw
right.
Gil
That's
Noble.
true. That's
God
right.
bless
So
Bill.
he gave my father his
What's the
first
name of that
job.
program?
It was-
WLIB. It was
Yeah, the McCrary report.
no. This was
No,
before that.
Positively Black.
It was before
it-
that. This was way back before my father got into TV. It was a radio show.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. That was
Yeah,
the TV.
WLIB radio.
Ah.
So Ali had just won the championship.
Ah.
And he sent
It
my,
was
and he was
early
in New
60s.
York. He was in New York at a restaurant, and the world news media was covering him and wanted to get an interview with Ali.
Ah.
So Bill said, "Go over and cover the story." Now my father wasn't known; he was just a black face in a sea of white reporters standing way in the back. And Ali came out, and he looked. He saw my father, and he went like this. And a sea of white reporters had to part to let my father through. And they're looking at my father
Think
like,
how
who is
biblical that is.
who is
Think
this
about
guy?
that.
Who is
That's
this guy?
biblical.
That's right.
Yeah.
And my father
That's
got
right.
up
For the white
into the
seat.
restaurant and said, "Thank you, Mr. Ali. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity."
Yeah. Yeah.
And he looked at my father and he said, "Don't worry about it, brother. Just make sure you pass on the favor."
Yeah. There you go.
Do you understand? That had such a profound effect on my father that someone in their early 20s, with the world in the palm of their hand, had the mindset, people first.
Well, that's how we used to
And my
deal
father
with it.
modeled his life
Yeah,
after
but
that.
see,
He
that's the way we used to deal with each other back in
Yeah.
the day.
Back in
And back in the 40s and the 50s, we had a family unit.
Yeah.
And I yearn for that to come back to us. And I think in a time like this, with the Trump fiasco, we have to unite once again
Yeah.
and get the spiritual energy stirring. So this all happened for a purpose, today.
Yeah.
You know what I
That
would-
Mary's here.
You
and-
know what I would like to see? I would like to see the offsprings of Adam Powell,
Oh,
in your case, Gil Noble. Any of the offsprings that are still present.
Malcolm's daughter.
His daughters.
oh,
Yasin's
wow.
doing
yeah.
great
Oh,
work.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
To be
wow.
able to look back at their lives and come up with three main thrusts that they can more or less bottle to pass on to this current generation.
Right, right.
Because
right.
one of the things that I find that's lacking is that our children don't sit to the table, not necessarily a table like this, but we're not passing the torch.
Right.
No
So
legacy.
you're fortunate, that, right, you're fortunate that they were able to capture your father's legacy. So you have that to go back and critique and listen. So you're blessed. Now, what are you going to do with that blessing? That's my question
yeah,
to you.
that's
What are you
my-
going to do with that blessing? Now, you've gone around and you've gone through some of the most trying times, and then just today was a test.
Oh,
I cannot
wow.
tell you how much of a test
Yeah.
today was for you. Now you have to sit somewhere, get in your closet, and you're going to have to pray hard. Whether it's to Allah, well, I believe in God, but God is a God. Just pray and ask Him to show you what do you do with your experience. How do you pass this torch? Because there's still so many young people, men and women, young boys, young girls that are incarcerated today that may or may not have had what you have. You can be the voice. Because, see, sometimes when you try to talk to young people, they say, what do you know? Have you done it? You don't know. You don't know my story. But see, you can tell them the story. You've been in the inside. You've been on the outside. And you
know,
have
that-
the resources now. It's up to you. There's this something so profound that you need to do. Maybe go back into the prisons and talk to people. Maybe have a show. I mean, there's so much things
I'd love to
going
have.
on now.
Yeah, I'd love to see you do a
Talk to
show
them.
with
The,
some of your
Talk to them.
father's
You know,
old tapes.
Encourage them. The ones that really
Yeah.
don't have no hope.
Oh, I am.
You understand what I'm saying? Because who reaches them? I mean, just imagine who reaches them. Like you say, when you got
There's
in,
a-
you was blessed.
There's an
Well, I
interesting
just got a
thing.
new show between the two of you, right there. You guys are great together. See how God just sends things to me? I mean,
There's-
it just happens. Yeah, we have
There's an-
about a minute left.
Well, that's it.
Yeah, wow.
Oh man! Because I wanted to get into this new form of mind control
Okay.
that is
We'll start on it and we'll
really the
finish.
strongest form of mind control I've ever seen in my life, and that's the cellular phone
Yes.
and the internet.
Yes.
People are on their phone 24/7.
Yes.
And it's the strongest form of mind control I've ever seen.
Yes,
and,
it
and the
is.
system has figured out a new way to control us.
Yes.
Because what they do is first they plant what they want in your
That's
appetite.
right.
They
That's
plant what they
right.
want you to desire.
That's right. Right.
And then with the phone and the internet, they feed it to you
That's right.
24/7.
That's right.
And just for Manhattan, the God in me loves the God in you.
Yep.
And stay tuned for more of the GILCHRIST experience. We got a minute left for the Bronx. But see, we're talking about mind control. So I want to mind control you right there. Just stay tuned to the GILCHRIST experience.
why you have
We'll
to
bring,
go
and we'll bring to you the God consciousness that's in you. You'll be surprised. So this is this is the
Right.
theme here. The God in me loves the God in you.
Yes, sir.
And
As a
see, we
man
go
thinketh,
through
so
these
is he.
experiences so
Yes.
we can
Right.
express these things.
Yeah.
And see, Mary just happened to be here to fill in for Leroy.
She didn't just happen.
Who, she just happened to
she
be
was called
here
to be here.
to bring in the
Called.
mothering, because God's a woman,
Yeah. Yes. Nurture.
Okay.
Nature.
Because, well, the human God is a woman because
Yes.
he produces life.
Yes.
And we give it to all the women out there. Peace and God. And believe we got your back.
That's right.
Chris and I got your
That's it.
back.
Yes,
And
we
the
got
rest
your
of the
back.
black men on the
Yes.
planet. Power to the people. God bless.
I didn't get a chance to thank you
Yeah.
for your life's work, man.
Yeah,
I mean-
if I wouldn't